Today we're going to review the process of how to apply for financial aid, principally with the FAFSA form, which is a free application for federal student aid. My name is Gary Schindler. I'm the Dean of Student Affairs at Riverland Community College, and I also serve as the Financial Aid Director. So the focus today is on the FAFSA.
Is there an ideal sequence of steps to consider when applying for financial aid?
I would say when you look at the process to apply for aid, there are 3 steps you should do. The first one is really critical since the FAFSA is keyed off of tax data. You want to file your taxes as soon as possible after the first of each year, and you have to apply for aid every year. So get your taxes completed as soon as possible, or get a very reliable estimate of what your tax data is going to be, and then you could apply on the FAFSA with estimated data. And we're going to talk later on in the presentation how you can get your actual tax data into your FAFSA if you do use estimates. The third step in the process would be to check to see if the college you're planning to attend or colleges you're considering have their own institutional financial aid application, because some colleges will have their own application that you need to complete for consideration for aid being awarded by that college or to complete the financial aid process. So the place to start when applying for financial aid is going to be the website FAFSA.gov. And again, a student cannot start this process till after January 1st each year that they're going to college. And eligibility is again keyed off of prior year taxes. So for example, this presentation is about aid for the 15-16 academic year. Aid eligibility is going to be based on a family's income, the college student's income for 2014. So FAFSA.ed.gov is the site that you go to. That one site, and again, you're going to establish a PIN number that's going to be your electronic signature. By the end of April of 2015, a college student, and if they're dependent, their parent will also need to establish a username and ID. It'll be going away from a PIN number to a username and ID. But the FAFSA.gov site is very comprehensive. It includes the place to apply. A person can make estimates of financial aid. They can get an estimate of their effectiveness there. Also, they can make corrections. They can look up college codes. They can go there to reapply for their 2nd, 3rd, 4th year of college. So it's a very comprehensive website.
I understand that I can have my FAFSA completed automatically. Actually,
there is an automatic connection, and here's how it works. It's called data retrieval. So if you file your tax form electronically, 2 to 3 weeks later, your data is going to be available from the IRS to automatically load into your financial aid application. So you file your taxes, 2 to 3 weeks later, you would go to FAFSA.gov, start your application for financial aid, then you'll be asked, do you want to do data retrieval? And by answering that question, yes, the tax data from your 1040 forms will automatically load onto that FAFSA form, both for the parent and for the college student. And if they're independent, it would just be the college student's tax information. If a student uses estimated tax data, what will happen is that you can, again, use estimated data. Once your taxes are finalized, you'll get a notification from the IRS to say, do you want us to load your tax data into your FAFSA form and replace your estimated data with actual data? And that may also come from the Department of Education, that notification. If you say yes, then your application will be corrected. So there is an automatic connection to this FAFSA form through the data retrieval process. And again, if the student uses estimated, once their taxes are final, they'll be notified and it can be downloaded after the fact.
What tax data is key for determining financial aid eligibility?
Yeah, they are key elements when determining if a student is eligible for financial aid. The key factors when it comes to income are adjusted gross income, the tax liability that they had as an individual. There are some other tax considerations too. It might be any educational tax credits that might have been applied that year, if there was a deduction from an individual retirement account to pay for college expenses, But for most individuals, the key factor is going to be adjusted gross income, both for the college student and for their parent if they're a dependent college student.
How can a college student be independent from their parents for financial aid purposes?
That's a good segue. On the FAFSA form, besides stating some general information about who I am, name, address, social security number, there are a series of questions that are yes/no questions. And because the FAFSA has to determine, are you an independent college student, which means you're not dependent on a parent, or are you a dependent college student, which means parent information has to be loaded on the form. A general rule of thumb is going to be that if the college student is 24 years of age or older, they are automatically considered independent of their parents, regardless of where they live. Same thing is true though. If I'm a college student and I'm under 24, if I move out of the house the day after graduation, high school graduation, and my parents say, okay, you're going, I'm not going to claim you as a dependent, you're on your own, good luck and congratulations. That doesn't make any difference. Every college student under 24 is considered dependent on their parent, regardless of where they live, regardless if they're claiming the parents' taxes or not. So that's a critical question on the FAFSA form. Are you over 24 or are you 24 years or older? There are other things that can make a college student, independent besides age. It would be, for example, have they earned their first bachelor's degree? If a student's pursuing a master's degree after their bachelor's, they're going to be independent. My son, for example, is pursuing his degree in archaeology. He earned his bachelor's degree when he was 22, and then he went into grad school. As soon as he started grad school, even though he was 24 years old, he was an independent college student, and my information did not have to go on his FAFSA form. So if you're going to grad school, you're independent. There are other things. If you're married, if you're under 24 and married, you're independent. If you have a dependent child that you're supporting at least half or more, you're considered independent and you don't have to put parent information on the FAFSA form. A veteran would apply. If a student's under 24 and a veteran, they would be considered independent for financial aid purposes. And then there are cases where an individual, if they're under 24, might be a ward of a court. There might be a case where they were removed from their home. They may even be a homeless youth, where if that can be documented and they're under 24, they would be considered independent and would not have to report any parent information on the FAFSA form.
How do assets come into consideration when determining financial aid eligibility?
Okay, good question. So when we're talking about what determines aid eligibility, we mentioned adjusted gross income. Another one is household size. How big is the household size for that college student? If they're dependent, their parents, and who else lives in the home. The other critical one is assets. Assets may have to be reported on a FAFSA form. And normally for the dependent college student that still has to put parent information on, that there's going to be an asset protection allowance. And that's normally triggered by the age of the oldest parent. So let's say someone's going to a 2-year college, they're right out of high school. If the age of their oldest parent is 40, they're going to have approximately a $40,000 asset protection allowance. And so when they're filling out the FAFSA form, they're going to have a question. Are your assets greater than $40,000? If they say no, they will not have to do any assets, report any at all. And if also that may be true if their adjusted gross income is below a certain level, they may not have to report any assets. If assets have to be reported, and the college student has to report assets as well, if they're dependent. Normally the asset questions are going to be these. There's a question about cash, savings, and checking, and they literally want to know the night you're filling out the FAFSA form online, how much money's in your pocket, how much money's in your checkbook, how much do you have in savings. I recommend you fill it out the day before payday because it's pretty low. But negative balances, you can't count those. But so asset, savings, checking, and the savings might be CDs, savings bonds, those sorts of things. The other asset question that a person may be asked is other investments. That may be things like if a person owns a stock or stocks, if they own CDs or mutual funds, those would have to be reported as other assets or other investments. Here's a couple key tips though. When it comes to a person's home, they do not have to report the equity in their home. So let's say they have a home that's worth $120,000 and they only have a debt on it of $60,000, they do not have to report dollars in equity. That does not have to be reported. A person does though have to report it on a second home. If somebody had a lake home, they have to report the value of that property, and that has to go under the home section or other residencies. Then the same thing is true. There are some exceptions for folks that are involved in agriculture and folks that are involved with a small business. If a person has a family farm where they live on the farm operation, they do not have to report the assets of that farm operation if they physically live on the farm operation itself. Same thing's true of small business. If a small business employs fewer than, I think it's somewhere between 50 and 75 employees, if they have an operation of that level, they do not have to report the assets of their small business. And that is an advantage to us farmers and also to folks that are involved in a small business operation.
What happens after my FAFSA is completed?
Well, you're getting a little bit ahead of me, but what happens with the FAFSA, once it's completed, the student will receive an email notification that the FAFSA has been completed and has been sent to the college. Then the college has all the information. And by the way, you don't have to be accepted by a college to have your FAFSA processed. You can send it to multiple colleges. You might get multiple notifications. But you do your FAFSA, you'll get a notification it's been processed. Then the college is going to work with that data. For about 70% of college students, you won't hear back from the college. They have your FAFSA, then they will provide you a notification of award. So that's the bottom line, that's the end of the journey when it comes to financial aid, is an award letter. Some colleges will send that in the mail. Some will send it via email, send you a notification via email. Some colleges will send you a postcard to say your financial aid is finalized. You can go into your student e-service account and check to see what your awards are. So it's FAFSA, notification it's been processed by the U.S. Department of Education, then some notification from the college that your aid has been finalized. There are about 30% of college students though that have to go through an audit, which is, the terminology is verification. The college, that's a random selection by the U.S. Department of Education where you have to then follow up with the college. They may want a copy of your tax transcript for the previous year. They might need a copy of the Social Security card. They might need to verify some untaxed income. So you have to monitor the progress of your aid to determine if you have to follow up. And again, colleges may send you a letter notifying you that you have to follow up because you've been verified. Some colleges just put the notice on your e-service account, and you need to be checking that periodically to make sure that you are staying on top of your aid application. Are there any other questions that people have that they haven't asked yet? Okay, there's some other things to be mindful of as you're applying for aid. On the FAFSA form, there are two other questions that I want to make sure I mention. First of all, there's a question that's called additional financial information. That's a question on the FAFSA, and that's typically going to be a report of some expense that becomes a deduction against your adjusted gross income. You want to make sure you take that. So that additional financial information question typically is going to be if a person had out-of-pocket child support payments. Those should be reported because that's going to be a subtraction from your adjusted gross income. The same thing is true of the second question, but it just works the opposite. There's going to be a question about other untaxed income, and that typically gets to be child support payments received, or if a person had a tax-deferred contribution to a retirement plan. Those contributions have to be put back into and added to adjusted gross income. Those are the typical ones. There are others. There's about 6 or 7 items under untaxed income. The typical ones are child support received and also a tax-deferred contribution the previous year to a retirement plan. When it comes to retirement plans, another important point is that when it comes to the asset section of a FAFSA, a parent and possibly the college student, they do not need to report the value of a retirement plan. So if a person has a 403B, 401K, some type of retirement plan, they do not report the balance of that plan on a FAFSA. It does not need to be reported. But if they made a tax-deferred contribution the year before, they do have to report that amount on the FAFSA, and it's added back to the adjusted gross income. So we've reviewed the process, the FAFSA form, the data retrieval from the IRS, and then some of the actions that happen once the college receives that. We reviewed dependency status, how can you become an independent college student, and some tips about how to handle those asset questions if that information has to be reported.